Good morning, O'Donnell Middle School. We are so happy to have you with us today for our annual Veterans Day Assembly. It's really a great opportunity for us to recognize the veterans from our community, the men and women who sacrificed for us. So this is a day that we are just so proud, and we're so happy that you can join us as 8th graders. This is something that we look forward to each year, and you're the leaders of the school, and you're gonna have your classmates part of this, whether they're part of the band or the chorus, or they interviewed a veteran. So it's gonna be a wonderful morning. And before we get started, of course, our guests of honor today, our veterans that joined us, they are going to join us up here on the stage. And as they come up to the stage, we'd appreciate you giving them a nice round of applause, all right? So could I please have our veterans come on in? All right, outstanding job by our 8th grade band. So to begin our ceremony today, our 8th grade chorus, led by Miss Betty Bowman, will sing the national anthem. So please rise.
Proud
Thank you, 8th grade. So before we get started, there are a lot of people that helped put together and plan this wonderful celebration of our veteran service. So I want to make sure that I recognize those people and those organizations. From the Council on Aging, Carolyn Lee and her assistant Jessica Frayne for the breakfast. Also Mr. Ed Gilbert, our food service director, Mr. John Homer, our custodian who helped set up, our wonderful band and chorus teachers, Mr. Kerbo and Miss Bowman, Miss O'Connell on decorations, our partners from Stoughton Media Access Corporation, Jeff Pickett and CJ Mullen. On behalf of myself and Miss Valaire, Caitlin Valaire is our 8th grade social studies teacher of 8B and our department head. We are very appreciative of those efforts from all the people that helped plan this. So thank you and a good round of applause for everyone that helped out. So Veterans Day this year falls on Saturday, and tomorrow you have Veterans Day off. That's the day that it is observed, tomorrow. But Veterans Day, you may not realize, is November 11th of every year. You may wonder, why is it November 11th? Well, it goes back to World War I. It goes back to about 100 years ago. And when World War I was ending, it ended on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. That's when World War I ended. And World War I was just a terrible, terrible war, and millions of soldiers were killed on all sides, and really the world was so happy when that World War ended. So November 11th became Veterans Day. During the course of the year, we have patriotic holidays. We've got the 4th of July, we've got Memorial Day, and we have Veterans Day. And it's important to realize that there is a difference between those days. On Veterans Day, we honor all that have served this country. And the men and women of this country throughout the beginning of our country, from the early days, revolutionary days, who served this country. This is a day that we honor those millions and millions of men and women that have served this country. So that's Veterans Day. Memorial Day in May is when we honor the fallen, those that have made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. And we will also have a Memorial Day program again this year in May. But today is Veterans Day, and today is a day to learn about the stories that these men and women to my left, their stories. A lot of them grew up here. Some of them went to school here and went to Stoughton High School and served this town. You recognize these faces. You're gonna recognize these people. And what we did was we took some 8th graders from our 3 teams, and they volunteered for this. They wanted to interview one of our veterans, and they want to share their story. So that is how this morning is going to proceed. We have our 8th grade students. They've got their notes. They're very brave to want to come up here and share the story. And we have some special presentations today, and all in all, it's going to be a wonderful morning. So our first veteran that we would like to recognize, and we're going to have April Richardson come up here in a moment, is Mr. Charlie Wade. Mr. Charlie Wade has been part of our Veterans Day program really since its inception. This started 13 or 14 years ago with just a conversation that I had with my friend Joe DeVito. And it really, Mr. Wade was one of those people that from the beginning was involved with it. So April Richardson, please come up. Charlie, wait 1 minute. April's gonna go first. Okay? April, come on up.
Hello, my name is April Richardson, and I would like to introduce Mr. Charles Wade. Mr. Wade was only 21 years old when he entered the military. However, this was not entirely his choice as he was drafted. So it was especially hard for Mr. Wade to join the military because at this time he had a wife and baby at home. Mr. Wade served in the Army branch of the military, and he specialized as a track vehicle repairman. He fixed machines and kept the technology working. Mr. Wade served in the military for 2 years. He was usually stationed in Europe, however, he did participate in the Korean War. Whilst in the military, Mr. Wade most enjoyed the people he bonded with and met. Mr. Wade wants us to not forget that we have our rights handed to us. However, it was not always this way. He asked this simple question: would you give up these rights to make sure others got their rights? This leaves us to wonder about how freedom is not without a price. And these veterans seated here today have contributed to the freedom that we all love about America. Thank you, Mr. Wade, for your service to our country.
Thank you very much.
So this morning, Mr. Wade wanted to share a very powerful story about Michael Romanick, who, as I was saying, Memorial Day, we talk about veterans and those that served that have made the ultimate sacrifice. But this morning, we wanted to talk about Michael Romanick. His story struck a special chord with us, especially now in 2017, with things that we hear on the news and going on in the world. This story that Mr. Wade is going to share with you about Michael Romanick, we think is going to have some deep meaning. So, Mr. Wade?
Thank you. And good morning. I'm here as a Stoughton veteran. I was a townie. I went through Stoughton schools. I got a good education. I was not the best scholar the school system ever had, don't get me wrong. But I got a good education. I've been able to make my way through life. And I've never been ashamed to say I went to school and got my education in my hometown of Stoughton. "2017 is the 100th anniversary of the United States involvement in World War I. On April 16, 1917, President Wilson signed legislation entering the United States into World War I. No census figures for Stoughton for 1917, but the total number of Stoughton High School students was 190. Total number of students in the high school. 394 men and 1 woman from Stoughton, Massachusetts. A nurse served in World War I. 17 men from Stoughton were killed in action. Many others died from other causes while serving overseas. November 11th, 2018, the 100th anniversary of the end of the Great War. Some 2 million doughboys served in Europe during the war. More than 100,000 died, including 53,543 to hostile causes. Michael Romanick was the first serviceman from Stoughton, Massachusetts to die in the service of the United States in World War I. Born July 1880 in Zwinaco, Russia, Romanick and his family emigrated to the United States around the turn of the century and settled in Stoughton, Massachusetts. At the time the United States entered World War I in 1917, Romanick still had not had himself declared a citizen, yet he wanted to fight for his adopted country. In order to obtain the special permission necessary for a non-citizen to enlist in the U.S. forces, Romanick sent letters to the governor, his congressmen, and other influential men affiliated with the town in search of a way to enter the U.S. Army. In the summer of 1917, Michael Romanick finally received permission to volunteer to serve in the Army, and on September 17, 1917, he entered the service. From Stoughton, he went to Camp Devens, where he was assigned to K Company. Of the 302nd Infantry. Private Romanick sailed for France with the 302nd Infantry in February 1918 to join the American Expeditionary Forces. Upon arrival in France, Romanick's company was disbanded and the troops from its ranks were used to reinforce other infantry companies under the command of American General John J. Pershing and Allied Commander-in-Chief Marshal Foch. Romanick's transfer placed him in Company D of the 165th Infantry. In May 1918, the 165th Infantry joined other American divisions to reinforce the French forces at a bridge near Chateau Thierry. German forces launched an offensive, and for nearly 4 months during the spring of 1918, they pounded the Chateau Thierry region. The Germans would never penetrate further west than their push into Chateau Thierry. The battle is considered one of the major engagements of World War I. July 21st, 1918, Romanick's company entered Chateau Thierry, where they were stationed to serve in defense of the town. During the weeks that followed, the Germans continued to fight skirmishes with the troops guarding the town. It was during one of these conflicts, on July 30th, 1918, that Michael Romanick was killed in action. Just 3.5 months before the armistice with Germany went into effect. Michael Romanick, who was buried in France, was the first Stoughton serviceman killed in action in World War I. March 10th, 1929, Michael Romanick Post 1645, Veterans of Foreign Wars, was duly organized and constituted in Stoughton, Massachusetts. To be a member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, a veteran must have served honorably during a war in the U.S. military. By naming the VFW post after Michael Romanick, his comrades in arms paid honor and everlasting respect to a Stoughton resident who gave his all for his country. Annually on November 11th, VFW Post 1645 remembers veterans. Perhaps some of the participants will also remember Michael Romanick, an honored veteran who chose to serve the country he called home. Veterans all gave some gave all. One further thing, as you proceed in life and you are asked to speak, I have 3 thoughts. Stand up to be recognized, speak up to be heard, and sit down to be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, as I was saying, some of our veterans here today went to Stoughton Public Schools. And our first one, Officer Matthew Gaeta, please stand up. And could I please have Colin Alessi? Colin Alessi is going to share Officer Gaeta's story.
Hello, I am Colin Alessi, and today I'm introducing Mr. Gaeta. Mr. Gaeta grew up in Stoughton, Massachusetts. He was 18 when he joined the military. Mr. Gaeta joined the military because he did not know what he wanted to do. Mr. Gaeta joined the Air Force. His role was transportation specialist. He served in the military for 6 years. Mr. Gaeta was stationed in United Arabs. When Mr. Gaeta most enjoyed about his time in the military was when he spent his years in South Korea. Mr. Gaeta would like to share to the students of OMS that enjoy school, because being an adult isn't always fun. Thank you, Mr. Gaeta, for your service.
Officer Billy Farwell, please stand up. Officer Farwell will be presented by Grace Lally.
Hello, my name is Grace Lally, and I would like to introduce Mr. Billy Farwell. Mr. Farwell grew up in Stoughton, Massachusetts, here, and he was 17 years old when he entered the military. He wanted to better himself outside of school, so that is why he joined the military. And he served in the Army as a bomb technician. And Mr. Farwell he is still in the military, and he has been in the military for 14 and a half years. During his service, Mr. Farwell was deployed to Balkans. He has responded to the 2013 Boston bombing. And he has been to Africa, and he has been there to teach about bomb disposal. And while in the military, Mr. Farwell mostly enjoyed traveling. Mr. Farwell would like to share with the OMS students that it is good to pay attention in school and do great in school. Thank you, Mr. Farwell, for your service to our country.
Officer Robert Devine, please stand up. Could I have Sophia Levia? Sophia, please come on up.
Hello, I'm Sophia Leva, and I'd like to introduce Robert Devine. He grew up in South Boston. He was 21 years old when he entered the military. The reason why he joined the military is because he finished college and he wanted to help people, and he seemed like the best opportunity. He served as a U.S. Coast Guard. He worked as a rescue swimmer, and basically he had to jump out of helicopters and save drowning victims. Mr. Robert Devine served in the military for 10 years, which was 1993 to 2003. During his service, Robert Devine was a U.S. Coast Guard. While he was in the military, Robert Devine most enjoyed having the opportunity to save victims. One thing he'd like to share with the OMS students is that you should never miss an opportunity to do things for others. Thank you, Mr.
So, over the years, we often have these wonderful moments where a son or daughter gets to introduce their father or their mother or a family member, and we have that today with Mr. Greg White. Mr. Greg White, please stand up. And can I have Emmanuel? Emmanuel, come on up.
Hi, I'm Emmanuel. I'd like to introduce my dad, Greg White. He grew up in Uniontown, Alabama. He was 22 years old when he entered the military, and he joined because he wanted to make a difference and serve his country. He served in the Air Force, and he worked as a military police. He was in the Air Force for 6 years, and was stationed at first in Cape Cod and then deployed to Iceland. He was in Iceland in 1983 for 2 years. No, Cape Cod, 1983 for 2 years, and Iceland for 1 year in 1985. His favorite part of the military was friendships, and he'd like for us to know that you should love what you do and do what you love. Pay attention, don't give up, follow directions, and stay focused. And thank you for serving our country.
Okay, a very familiar face to us all. Officer Isabel, please stand up. Eve is going to share Officer Isabel's story.
Hello, I am Eve Sade. I would like to introduce Miss Isabel. She grew up in Brockton, Massachusetts, and she entered the military when she was 17 years old. And Miss Isabel joined the Army because her family didn't come from a lot, and it was her way to explore the world. Miss Isabel served in the Army, and she worked as a surgical technician, which means that she assisted during surgeries. She served in the military for 9.5 years, and during their service, Miss Isabel was deployed to Iraq in 06 and 07. And during the military, she most enjoyed the camaraderie, and I didn't know what that meant, so I asked her, and she said that they were the friendships different than any other, and they were friendships that your friends that you would take a bullet for. Miss Isabel would like to share with the students of OMS that you should never limit yourself and never let your fears or challenges hold you back. Thank you, Miss Isabel, for your service.
Mr. Mike Pizarro, please stand up. And Genesis Parker is going to share Mr. Pizarro's story.
Hi, I'm Genesis Parker, and I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Mike Pizarro. Mr. Pizarro grew up in Malden, and he was 20 years old when he entered the military. He volunteered into the military because he was going through a little bit of a rough patch. He had just dropped out of college, and his girlfriend broke up with him, but also a lot of his friends were in the military. Mr. Pizarro served in the military in the Marine Corps, so he worked in the Marine barracks. Mr. Pizarro served in the military for 2 years, and during his service, he was stationed in Washington, D.C. While he was in the military, Mr. Pizarro enjoyed seeing famous people. He often saw President Nixon, and he also enjoyed camaraderie. Yeah. Mr. Pizarro had a piece of advice to share to the students of OMS. He said, "We all stand on the shoulders of the people before us, so respect your elders, especially the ones who served for you." Thank you, Mr. Pizarro, for your service.
Mr. Tom Fitzgerald, please stand up. And Sydney Menz is going to share Mr. Fitzgerald's story.
Hello, I am Sydney Menz, and I would like to introduce Mr. Tom Fitzgerald. Mr. Fitzgerald grew up in Braintree, Massachusetts. He was 18 years old when he enlisted in the military. Mr. Fitzgerald joined the military because he was going to be drafted, and he had a choice, so he chose the Air Force. He served in the Air Force as a cryptographer, so he worked in coding. He served in the Vietnam War for 4 years. During his service, Mr. Fitzgerald was stationed in Texas, Massachusetts, and Mississippi. While in the military, Mr. Fitzgerald most enjoyed the friends that he made. And a piece of advice he would like to share is he likes peace and not war, so always be kind. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Could I just say, I didn't serve in Vietnam. I served in Vietnam era. I served stateside. Thank you.
So Yasmin Souza is going to come up to introduce Paul Andrew Child. Paul was not able to be with us this morning, but he was with us last week and did a wonderful presentation of what life was like in the U.S. Navy. So come on up.
Hello, I am Yasmin Souza. I was very lucky to meet Mr. Andrew Chow, and I'm glad I get to introduce him today. Mr. Andrew Chow grew up in Somerville, Massachusetts. He was only 16 years old when he decided to join the Navy. A lot of young adults ask themselves, where am I going in life? For Mr. Andrew Chow, joining the military answered this question. Along with him thinking he would look great in the uniform, he thought this job served the country well and gave him pride. This defined and patriotic career was what Mr. Andrew Chow decided he would want to as a way of protecting this country. Mr. Andrew Chow worked as a deck line officer. Mr. Andrew Chow was stationed in Newport, Rhode Island, and San Diego, California. He was also sent away to Vietnam during the Vietnam War. The USS Warden was the ship Mr. Andrew Chow was on. Even though staying away from his family for long periods of time was difficult, Mr. Andrew Chow enjoyed many things about the military. He loved meeting new people, and he liked the feeling of doing something important. Mr. Andrew Chow proudly served 6 years in the military. While I was with Mr. Andrew Chow, he gave us OMS students some advice. He started off with always eat your broccoli. A healthy body equals a healthy mind. He also said do everything to your best ability and to look for challenges. Trying everything in moderation is very important because you have to stay true to yourself. Thank you, Mr. Andrew Chow, for your service.
Mr. Joe Fustolo, please stand up. Bella DiMarino is going to share his story.
Hello, my name is Bella DiMarino. I would like to introduce to you today Joe Fustolo. Mr. Fustolo grew up here in Stoughton, Massachusetts. He was 19 years old when he first entered the military. Mr. Fustolo decided to volunteer in the military. He knew he was going to be drafted, so he figured he'd pick what he wanted to be. Mr. Fustolo served in the Air Force. He worked as an aircraft maintenance specialist. He served active in the military for 4 years. During his service, Mr. Fustolo was stationed in Delaware, Florida, Vietnam, and West Ever. While in the military, Mr. Fustolo most enjoyed traveling. He enjoyed traveling most because he got to go to so many places that he never dreamed of going to. Mr. Fustolo would like to share with the students at OMS today to always respect your flag and be thankful for your freedom. Thank you, Mr. Fustolo, for your service in our country.
Okay, Mr. Richard Hickey, he did have to leave. He was here this morning for our breakfast, and Mrs. Gorman in our office, this is her brother. So Jonah Lee is going to come up and share what he learned about Mr. Hickey. Come on up, Jonah.
Hi, I'm Jonah Lee. I would like to introduce Mr. Rich Hickey. He grew up in South Boston and was 18 years old when he entered the military. Mr. Hickey joined the military because he was drafted. He served in the Air Force and worked as an ammunition specialist. He served in the military for 20 years. During his service, he stationed and deployed in Massachusetts, Korea, Thailand, and many more places. While in the military, Mr. Hickey most enjoyed meeting people and making friends. He liked to share to the OMS to be a patriot and to respect the country and its flag. Thank you, Mr. Hickey, for your service to our country.
Mr. Joe DeVito, please stand up. Joe's story is going to be presented by Evan Hoover.
Good morning, fellow students and faculty. I would like to start off by giving the veterans among us a warm welcome and a thank you for all that you've done for America. Just a few days ago, I had the privilege of meeting Mr. Joe DeVito and getting to ask him a few questions about his experiences from war. For those who aren't already aware, Mr. DeVito is from Stoughton and he served in World War II. When he joined the Army, he had just graduated from Stoughton High. And then he was drafted into the military. He was put in the Navy that November as a part of the PT boats, or patrol torpedo boats. He and his squadron would basically watch over the oceans between Japan and the US territories in case of bombing or torpedoes fired by the Japanese. This was a very dangerous job because of how blind they were to the torpedoes. One minute the skies would be clear and the next it would be chaos. This reminds me of a story that Mr. DeVito told me. He was west of the Philippines on his ship with his squadron and it was late in the evening. He and his shipmates were having a party. The band was playing and everyone was having a good time when all of a sudden they hear a boat ahead of them had just gotten torpedoed. They made it out of the area safely, but I can only imagine how tense he must have felt. Towards the end of my interview with Mr. DeVito, I asked him if he had any advice for the students of the OMS. I will remember these words for the rest of my life and I hope that you will too. He said, "Look at education as building blocks and set small goals for yourself and that lead up to one big goal. Climb those blocks like a ladder and you will be successful. Let this be a reminder to us all to do our best in school because it's the foundation of our future. I think that today we all get caught up in our own lives and hardships that we endure, and talking with Mr. DeVito really put everything that I go through on a daily basis into perspective. Getting to hear what it was like during the war really made life appear on such a bigger scale than I'm used to. He showed me that I am small in a big world, and that gives me even more of a reason to be making the most of my time and be the biggest I can in a crowd of small in our huge world. So thank you once again, Mr. DeVito, to all the veterans here today and across the country. Without you, we wouldn't have the country either."
So listening to these stories of these wonderful men and women to my left, something stands out to me, and that's just their service, not only in the military, but after the military, and some of them still in the military. Just a lifetime of service, of serving their town, and then a lot of them choosing careers, whether it's law enforcement, or the Stoughton Fire Department has a number of veterans. Serving others is really a theme that these men and women have, and I just think that is something that stands out. These are our best and brightest. They could have gone into all sorts of careers and made millions of dollars, but instead, even after their service was done, choosing careers that serve this country and serve this town. So we're very proud of that, and thank you. So our chorus and band, they have been practicing really since the beginning of September. And our chorus has a patriotic medley that Ms. Bowman is leading. So that is the next part of our program before we get to a special presentation. Outstanding work, our 8th grade chorus. If there's a better 8th grade chorus or band in this state, I would want to meet them because you sound outstanding. So great job, and a credit to your teachers. Okay, at this point I'd like to introduce the architect of this program, our 8B Social Studies teacher extraordinaire and our department head, Miss Belair. Come on up.
Okay, good morning, everyone. All right. If upon entering our assembly this morning, you simply viewed Veterans Day as a day off from school, one to sleep in, hang out with friends, play video games, or there you go, or just be lazy, my hope is that by the end of our program, you will no longer think these things, because that perception of Veterans Day belongs to ignorant and ungrateful Americans. I want you to walk out those doors in the back today as mindful and appreciative young citizens who recognize that Veterans Day is an extremely important holiday that is not actually about us at all. The true purpose of Veterans Day is to honor and thank the millions of soldiers who protect our country, our rights, and our freedoms. Veterans should be recognized for their achievements, dedication, and courage 365 days a year. But on November 11th, we draw special attention to them because without these men and women up here with you today, you wouldn't have a day off from school tomorrow to do whatever it is that makes you happy. Having heard the amazing experiences of the veterans, you should know that although these men and women came from very different backgrounds and entered the military for different reasons, they do share several important qualities: courage, pride, determination, selflessness, dedication, and patriotism. These are the characteristics that allow veterans to willingly serve their nation, responding in extraordinary ways in desperate times to keep our country safe and protect our rights and freedoms here at home. Last year, we had added a new component to our annual Veterans Day Assembly. OMS would give a special award to one of our veteran participants to honor and thank them for their service to both the country and the town of Stoughton. Our first award, the Road to Victory brick, that you can see right up there, was presented to Mr. DeVito last year, and this brick is at the World War II Museum in New Orleans. If you haven't heard, that brick has gone a very long way, as about a month ago, Mr. DeVito, his wife Jean, who's here with us, their daughters, son-in-laws, and granddaughters ended up going to New Orleans, courtesy of JetBlue Airlines, to see the brick in person. I guess it was in the best spot possible, so we couldn't have picked a better one. Tour the museum, and Joe even got to take a ride on a PT boat, just like the one he was assigned to in World War II. So we, just seeing how far that brick had gone, we want to do something else. Maybe every year we can keep this little nominations for awards going. So today I have the privilege of thanking another veteran who is up here on the stage with us today, a longtime Stoughton resident and OMS Assembly participant. He is also an advocate for local veterans. At 87 years young, Mr. Charles Wade was called upon by his country to help promote democracy in another less fortunate place. Charlie was one of the 1.8 million Americans who served in the Korean War from 1950 to 1953. During that time, Charlie served 1 year and 4 months overseas. Returning home here to Stoughton, Mr. Wade remained active in the veterans community, as he mentioned with his speech earlier, and he's very proud to be a member of the Michael Romanick VFW Post 1645, and he has also assisted with the annual memorial dedications in the town of Stoughton. Many of you have, I'm sure, driven by, lived by them. Those are those blue signs honored for different veterans who have served. Unfortunately for Mr. Wade and many of his Korean War comrades, the Korean War tends to be one of the least discussed and least understood conflicts in American history. Shadowed between World War II and Vietnam, many Korean War veterans have felt ignored, silenced, and forgotten. Mr. Wade, on behalf of OMS, I want to let you know that your service will never be forgotten and that we are eternally grateful for you and all of America's Korean War veterans. Thanks to the generous donations from the OMS faculty, students, and members of the community, I am pleased to present to you today a lifetime membership to the Korean War Veterans Association, whose mission is to defend our nation, care for our vets, perpetuate our legacy, remember our missing and fallen, maintain our memorial, and support a free Korea. A generous donation has also been placed in your name to help the Korean War Veterans Association host the 2017 Veterans Day ceremonies at Arlington National Cemetery this coming weekend. The donation is helping provide a welcome reception, wreath-laying ceremony, and transportation for Korean veterans to go to both Arlington National Cemetery and the Korean War Memorial. Mr. Wade, thank you to your service to your country. Thank you for your continued impact in the Stoughton community, and congratulations on being the O'Donnell Middle School's 2017 Veteran of the Year.
Thank you so very much. Thank you all very much, and I accept this on behalf of all my fellow Korean veterans who served, some of whom never came home. Thank you.
Mr. Mike Pizarro is going to speak for a few minutes about programs going on to honor our veterans in town. And just like I was talking about a few minutes ago, Mr. Pizarro chose to serve his town and his community by being the veterans agent for Stoughton. So I'm going to invite Mr. Pizarro to come on up for a moment and talk about what is going on connected to Veterans Day. Thank you, Mr. Pizarro.
Thank you. First of all, for Ms. Segulia, Ms. Valaire, and for all of you here, I think I'm speaking for everyone here. We are honored to be here and much appreciative of the warm welcome you've given us, so thank you. Before I get to the parade, let me just say, you know, at this point in our nation's history, only approximately 1% of our citizens actually serve in the military. And with all the things going on in the world, you know, and I mention this often, it's like Winston Churchill said in World War II about the Royal Air Force, never in the course of human events have so many owed so much to so few. And it's sort of the same thing now here in this country with so few people serving in the military. I'm not advocating anybody join the military now. I don't want your mothers all calling me. I don't want that happening. But on Veterans Day, and particularly for our active duty servicemen, it truly is appreciated to have, you know, young men and women like you and, you know, your school principal, assistant principal, and teachers honoring us. So it's very, very much appreciated. The Pentagon, by the way, calls the military the nation's largest family business, as it tends to be a generational thing. Moving forward, we have the Veterans Day Parade on Saturday, so I know you all have the day off. Now, it's going to be a relatively cold day, so I've been told, actually warned rather, by the VFW to keep it moving because of the cold. But, you know, you'll find it's a very interesting survey and a moving ceremony, and even though it's a day to honor all veterans, we do as well as we do on Memorial Day honor all those veterans who have basically been killed in action in service to their country. So hopefully I'll see some of you there then. And again, thank you very much for your kind reception you've given us.
So I just want to make sure that I once again recognize the 8th grade students that volunteered and showed a lot of courage by coming up here today. You did a great job, 8th grade students. Outstanding. You represented your town well. And our band and chorus, led by Mr. Curbo and Ms. Bowman, thank you so much for the music today. We're so appreciative of that. So today, we hope that as you look back at your middle school career and your school career, that you remember when you were in 8th grade and you either met one of the veterans on the stage or you heard their story and you remembered some of the lessons that we hope that you've learned this morning. And we hope that if you know a veteran or you see a veteran, that you thank them, that you recognize their service. And that's all we're asking, is for you to take a moment and remember that. Oftentimes we have former students come back and they remember today. They remember today 10, 20 years later. So we hope it's the same for you. We appreciate your attention this morning. And we will conclude our ceremony with our veterans meeting back at the Media Center. And again, one last round of applause for our veterans that joined us today. Can you lead the group in a minute? Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Our band is going to play as our veterans leave. Thank you very much, everyone, for your attention. Officer Devine is going to lead our veterans out. Everyone else, please stay in your seats. Please stay in your seats, and we will dismiss you.